My boss took credit for my $25,000 deal and said, "You'll never succeed without me." Guess who just took his job? So this happened a few years ago, but the memory of it still gets my blood boiling. I've kept this story to myself for way too long, but I think it's time to share how my boss completely screwed me over, only to have karma come back around in the most beautiful way. It's a long one, so bear with me. So, I was working for this logistics company called Ridgewell Enterprises. It wasn't glamorous or anything, but it paid the bills, and I was good at my job. I'd been there for a little over 2 years and everything went down. Ridgewell was a small to mid-sized company in Midland, Texas, a dusty little town where everyone knows everyone. It wasn't the kind of place where you'd expect corporate drama, but oh boy, was I wrong. My boss at the time was this guy named Trevor Albright. Let me tell you about Trevor. He was the kind of guy who walked into a room and immediately made it worse. Think slicked back hair, overpriced suits, and an ego so big it barely fit through the door. He acted like he was the second coming of Elon Musk, but really, he was just a trust fund kid with a fancy title. The guy didn't do a damn thing besides delegate, take credit for other people's work, and make snide comments to anyone who dared challenge him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'd been working my ass off at Ridgewell, building relationships with clients and trying to prove myself. I wasn't the top dog or anything, but I was consistent. I hit my targets, stayed late when I had to, and always tried to keep my head down to avoid Trevor's wrath. I figured if I just kept my nose clean and did my job, I'd eventually move up the ladder. Turns out, I was dead wrong. The deal that started it all came about during my second year at Ridgewell. It was a $25,000 contract with a company called Houston Heavy Logistics. For a small firm like Ridgewell, a deal that size was a big freaking deal. I spent weeks working on it, late nights, endless phone calls, driving down to Houston to meet the client in person. It wasn't easy, but I finally got them to sign. When they did, I was over the moon. It felt like all my hard work was finally paying off. The next day, Trevor called an all-hands meeting. Now, usually, these meetings were just an excuse for him to pat himself on the back and make us listen to his vision for the company, which was just corporate jargon for do more work. But this time, he had some exciting news to share. "I'm thrilled to announce," Trevor said, puffing out his chest like a goddamn peacock, "that I've closed a $25,000 deal with Houston Heavy Logistics. This is a huge win for Ridgewell and a testament to the kind of leadership we bring to the table." I sat there, staring at him, my mouth slightly open. What? This guy had done nothing, absolutely nothing, to close that deal. I'd been the one who courted the client, handled every negotiation, and sealed the agreement. Trevor hadn't even been in the room when it happened. And now he was standing there, taking credit for my work like it was the most natural thing in the world. After the meeting, I stormed into his office. I didn't even knock. "Trevor, what the hell was that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He leaned back in his chair, completely unfazed. "What do you mean?" he asked, that stupid smirk plastered on his face. "That deal was mine," I said. "I spent weeks working on it. You can't just take credit for it." Trevor sighed like I was a child who didn't understand how the world worked. "Look, Ophelia, yes, that's my name. My mom had a thing for Shakespeare. This is how the business world works. We're a team. What's good for me is good for you. You should be happy that I'm putting Ridgewell on the map." "Putting Ridgewell on the map?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You didn't even lift a finger. That was my deal, Trevor. My work." Trevor stood up, towering over me. He was taller than me by a good foot, and he knew how to use his size to intimidate people. "Listen to me," he said, his voice low and patronizing. "Credit doesn't matter. Results do. And let me give you some advice, you'll never succeed without me. You're good, Ophelia, but you're not great. Stick with me, and maybe you'll learn a thing or two." I walked out of his office shaking with anger. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to quit right then and there. But I didn't. I couldn't. I had bills to pay, and finding a new job in Midland wasn't exactly easy. So, I swallowed my pride and went back to my desk, vowing to never let that man take advantage of me again. But of course, he did. Over the next few months, Trevor made it his mission to undermine me at every turn. Every time I closed a deal, he'd find a way to insert himself into the process and claim it as his own. He'd talk over me in meetings, dismiss my ideas, and take credit for my successes. It was like he was trying to erase me from the company's narrative. And the worst part? It worked. The higher-ups loved Trevor. They thought he was some kind of sales genius when, in reality, he was just a leech, sucking the life out of his team to prop himself up. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. No matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. Trevor always found a way to make it seem like I wasn't pulling my weight. I'd stay late, work weekends, and push myself to the brink of burnout, only to have him swoop in and take all the credit. And then one day, I snapped. I just closed another big deal, this one worth $15,000, and Trevor pulled the same stunt he always did. He swooped in at the last minute, slapped his name on it, and presented it to the team as his own. But this time, instead of confronting him, I stayed quiet. I realized something that day: Trevor wasn't going to change. He was always going to be this slimy, arrogant jerk who took credit for other people's work. The only way I was going to win was by playing the long game. So, I started making a plan. I started planning my revenge like it was a second job. I knew I couldn't confront Trevor directly. He was too good at twisting the narrative and making me look bad. No, if I wanted to take him down, I'd have to be smart. I'd have to beat him at his own game. The first step was simple: keep my head down. I stopped challenging him when he took credit for my work. I nodded along in meetings, agreed with his stupid ideas, and acted like I was completely on board with his so-called leadership. I wanted him to think I'd given up, that I'd accepted my role as his personal doormat. Meanwhile, I started quietly building up my own connections outside of Ridgewell. I had a solid client base from my work at the company, and I started reaching out to them, not as an employee of Ridgewell, but as Ophelia, the person they trusted to get things done. I didn't poach anyone outright, that would have been too risky, but I planted seeds. I let them know that if they ever needed help outside of Ridgewell, I'd be there. At the same time, I started documenting everything. Every email, every deal, every time Trevor took credit for my work, I saved it all. I kept a running log of every shady thing he'd ever done, complete with dates, times, and screenshots. I didn't know exactly how I'd use it yet, but I figured it would come in handy eventually. And then, the opportunity I'd been waiting for practically fell into my lap. One of Ridgewell's biggest competitors, Titan Logistics, announced they were expanding into the Midland market. They were setting up a new office and looking for experienced salespeople to lead the charge. I applied immediately. I didn't tell anyone, not even my closest coworkers. The last thing I needed was for Trevor to find out and sabotage me before I even got started. The interview process was intense, but I nailed it. By the time I walked out of that final meeting, I knew the job was mine. And not just any job, Titan was offering me a senior sales position. The title, the salary, the benefits, it was everything Trevor had been dangling in front of me for years but never actually delivered on. And the best part? I'd be working directly with Houston Heavy Logistics, the client Trevor had stolen from me. It felt like poetic justice. But I wasn't done yet. I wanted Trevor to feel the fallout of everything he'd done to me, and I wanted to make sure everyone knew exactly who he was before I walked out the door. On my last day at Ridgewell, I scheduled a meeting with our CEO, Conrad Bainbridge. Conrad was one of those old-school businessmen who valued results above all else. He didn't care about office politics or personal drama, he just wanted to see the numbers. I walked into his office with my laptop and a folder full of receipts. "Conrad," I said, "I'm here to give my notice. I've accepted a position with Titan Logistics." He raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. I could tell he was surprised, though. I'd been one of the top performers at Ridgewell for years, and I knew losing me would hurt. "But before I go," I continued, "there's something you need to know. I've worked hard for this company, and I've always tried to do my best. But Trevor has been taking credit for my work since day one. Every deal he's claimed as his own. That was me. Every idea he's pitched in meetings. Mine. And I can prove it." I opened my laptop and started showing him everything: the emails, the screenshots, the call logs. I even had audio recordings of Trevor admitting, in his smug, condescending way, that he took credit for my $25,000 Houston deal because that's how the business world works. By the time I was done, Conrad looked furious. "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention," he said, his voice tight. "We'll be conducting a thorough investigation." I nodded, thanked him for the opportunity to work at Ridgewell, and walked out of his office feeling lighter than I had in years. But I wasn't done yet. Before I left, I sent an email to the entire sales team. I kept it professional, but I made sure to include a subtle dig at Trevor. Something like, "I'm proud of everything I've accomplished here, even if not everyone gave me the credit I deserved. I'm excited to start a new chapter where my hard work will truly be recognized." Trevor didn't say a word to me as I packed up my desk. I think he knew the jig was up, even if he didn't know exactly how bad it was going to get. Fast forward a few weeks. By this point, I was settled into my new role at Titan, loving every second of it. The team respected me, my boss was a million times better than Trevor, and I was finally making the kind of money I deserved. But the cherry on top came when I got a call from one of my old coworkers at Ridgewell. "Have you heard about Trevor?" she asked, barely able to contain her laughter. Apparently, the investigation I'd sparked had uncovered a treasure trove of dirt on Trevor. Turns out, I wasn't the only one he'd screwed over. He'd been fudging sales numbers, lying to clients, and generally being the massive tool we all knew he was. Ridgewell fired him on the spot. Last I heard, he was working at his dad's car dealership in some backwater town, trying to sell used Hondas to people who couldn't care less about his vision. As for me, I'm thriving. My team at Titan recently landed a $50,000 deal with Houston Heavy Logistics, and my boss made sure everyone knew it was my work that got it done. I even got a bonus. So yeah, Trevor was right about one thing: I didn't succeed because of him. I succeeded in spite of him. And it feels damn good. That's it. That's how my sleazy boss thought he could take credit for my work and get away with it, only to have it all come crashing down.